Hi, everyone. This is Evita and Sean Duffy at From Z to X, a new podcast with the Federalist where we talk about pop culture and politics.
From dad and daughter.
Right.
Pretty cool.
So first, we're going to talk about the Trump rallies that happened this weekend, ones here in our hometown, and also the ones that happened, or the one that happened in Washington, D.C. And then we're going to talk about some craziness at CNN with them comparing the Trump administration to the genocidal Nazi Germany.
Crazy. So let's first talk about the Trump rallies. Let's start with the one that we had in Warsaw. Then we can talk about the one that happened in Washington, D.C., the massive Million MAGA March. You were at the event in Warsaw. What was going on? What was the vibe? How many people turned out?
Yeah, so the Warsaw March was actually a march for or not a march, a protest in Marathon County.
Peaceful.
Right, peaceful, of course, to support the president. And people showed up with homemade signs, and they waved Trump flags and put them on their trucks and honked their horns and peeled out and burned out next to the rally. And they had a couple, like maybe 3 speakers, I think, who just kind of talked about, why they're out here, why they suspect fraud, and the importance of the administration and what they've done in the last 4 years.
We're in the middle of November in Wisconsin, so it was a day where it was cold, a little bit windy and drizzly, and there was still about 200 people that showed up on the courthouse lawn. There was no rioting, there was no looting, no one was beaten up. It was people in Trump gear, Trump flags, American flags. And it seemed like people were saying, we want to make sure that this was a fair vote, that all the legal votes are counted and the illegal votes are not counted. And there's a lot of Americans, a lot of Trump supporters who don't believe like the election was fair. I mean, we're going to find that out. The president's, doing lawsuits right now. But you can't deny that there's this feeling in America that people don't feel like the election was fair. And I believe as conservatives, tell me if you agree with this, Evita, if we lose an election, we wrap it up, we go home, and you work to win the next election. You work twice as hard. You don't riot, you don't learn, you don't burn, you don't complain and stomp your feet or howl at the moon and cry like liberals. You accept it. But there's this gut feeling that, with mail-in balloting, that there, and the fact that the poll watchers weren't able to, watch the count happen. Republicans were kicked out. This Dominion counting system, where there was some glitches that switched votes, especially in Michigan. We saw that from Trump to Biden. How prevalent was that? Those were all concerns that I thought that they had. Was I right about that?
Yeah, and I think that, in a small town, right? They're in rural Wisconsin. What can they really do? Is the question. And they were there basically to say, we want to, showcase that we're upset about this. So even if they themselves aren't going to be they're not going to be one of Trump's lawyers. They're not, right? But they're telling the representatives that this is important. We want you to follow up. We want you to look into this, to fight for us, because it's what we elected you to do. And so I think a lot of them were not only upset about the liberal and the corporate media calling the election so early, but they were also really, really upset with the representatives, and maybe not upset, but just wanting to hold them accountable to say, hey, fight for this guy. He's been fighting for us for 4 years. It's your duty now to show up and do your job and make sure that we see an investigation through.
So what points did you hear brought up about politicians and what they were doing right now during this time from election day to right now?
Well, I mean, I think that there's a lot of frustration with a lot of leaders from the Republican Party, a lot of people who might be 2024 hopefuls, and they might not, be super keen on getting Trump reelected because it's always better to run against a Democrat. So when a Democrat was in office right before you. So I think that's an issue from a lot of leaders in the Republican Party. And they're frustrated. They're saying, one woman was like, we're here, I'm showing up, it's cold outside, and I'm doing my part, so now you do yours. You stand up for us for once, have a backbone, is what she said.
And I think that there's this commentary that, where is everybody? Where are my assemblymen, my state senators? Where are my congressmen, my US senators? Where are the elected Republicans saying, not that it was fraudulent, but say, hold on a second. Let us have the time to look at what happened here to make sure it was legitimate. And there was a feeling that, folks have run for the hills and have abandoned the president. And as you said, a president who has fought really hard for conservative principles. You might not always like the way he fought. I did. I like the way he fought. I think you did too. I really love the president. But some people didn't. but he fought for you. You should now fight for him. And when people at the rally didn't see that, I think they were upset. So I think that was the overall feeling that we had at the cold, drizzly Wisconsin rally. That was of high spirits and a lot of trucks and a lot of squealing tires. Squealing tires for Trump is what it was. So let's talk about the DC rally.
And one more point about the Wisconsin rally is that, you know, the DC rally got a lot of attention. We're going to talk about that, but also all of these little rallies for Trump across the country were completely unreported by the media. I mean, people talked about the violence of the DC rally, all of these little organic ones that happened all over the country in small town flyover America, totally unreported. And it's really unfair.
Well, it's kind of like all of the boat rallies, the car rallies, the motorcycle rallies, the golf cart rallies for Trump. This is just the same people coming out to say, we love him, we support him, and we want to give him time, right? Yeah. All right, let's talk about the DC rally, massive MAGA march in DC. And you covered it or wrote on it for the Federalist. You weren't there, but
spent a lot of time looking at social media. So I mean, it was a massive march. I think Politico reported that there were hundreds there. There were not hundreds.
Hundreds of people at the march?
There were thousands, tens of thousands of people there. And it was a massive march. You could just see from the photos. There was definitely more than hundreds there. And I know that there were some people at the Federalist who were there and just were commenting on the diversity of Trump supporters was a big thing. I mean, there was LGBTQ for Trump, Latinos for Trump, Hungarians for Trump. Like, I mean, just a wide range of people who really exemplified the diversity that Trump has brought to the Republican Party. And I think that what it really means is, I mean, obviously they're there to support the president and to make sure that an investigation is had for potential fraud. But what it really showed to me, the big takeaway was that we're not heading back to the pre-Trump era anytime soon. That his supporters are now the base of the Republican Party, and he has really transformed it into this massive movement, which is really incredible, and also is going to play a big part in politics in years to come.
Well, when you talk about the diversity of folks that were there, and I think it's the message of President Trump, which is the message of America, the message of opportunity and freedom and upward mobility and a great economy. So people are competing for your labor, which means your wages will rise, your opportunity increases. That touches everybody's heart. It doesn't matter if you're white, brown, black, Hungarian. I don't know, there's Hungarians there. If you're gay or lesbian, people love when you have leaders that put their country first. And that's what President Trump did, which is why you get this massive diversity. It's a message for everybody, because America is a message, an idea for everybody, which is why you saw that kind of diversity at the march, which is really, really cool. And as you looked at social media, did you see the Trump supporters burning buildings? Were they looting? Were they upset because they lost and destroying property? Did that happen?
No, I mean, what I saw was it was a joyful march. I mean, there was excitement and enthusiasm, and even though they were demanding something, I mean, they want there to be investigation into fraud. It was really, to me, it looked like more of a celebration. And on the contrast, we saw the BLM and Antifa, rioters who showed up in riot gear, with explosives, ready to cause mayhem. And I think that even by looking at them, you can tell who's here for what. I mean, a lot of the people that were here there to support Trump came with their families. I mean, there were young kids there with homemade signs, out there just to support the president. And on the flip side, we saw a very different crowd from the counter protesters.
No, it was, if you watch the videos, they're disturbing to see, an older guy walking down the street with a bloody nose, but then getting cold cocked in the side of the head and dropped, and then his head snapped on. As you mentioned, families that were being harassed, I mean, fearful for their lives. Old guy who was knocked off his bike and robbed. These are the things that were happening to Trump supporters. And listen, I think that what you're going to find is this group of Americans, the Trump supporting American, the Republican conservative Americans, they're peaceful. They want to come out and have their voices heard, and they don't want to fight back. They don't want to push back. They're taking the abuse right now. But if our leaders, if our mayors and our law enforcement don't get engaged and keep people safe, which is what their job is to keep people safe, right? Enforce our laws. If they don't do that, you're going to start to see the other side, the Trump side, start to push back and fight back. And then you get war on your streets. That's not what we want. That's not what we're about in America. And if you don't want that, then do your job and have a mass presence there and keep everybody safe. Keep the BLM, Antifa folks, keep them away. Get safe passage for the Trump supporters. But we saw it, one at the Trump rally last weekend, but you also saw it when President Trump gave his acceptance speech at the White House, and people were leaving the grounds. We saw the video of Rand Paul and his wife and others. Everyone was attacked by these radicals. You got to be able to keep people safe in this country. This has to be unacceptable, and it can't be tolerated.
The fact that people, like, before election night, are boarding up their businesses and their homes, afraid of what's going to happen, is a sign that there's a sickness in America.
If Trump would win, right? If Trump was going to win, they were going to loot and burn the downtown communities all across America.
Yeah, where was the story about all the Trump supporters who burned down buildings when the media called it for Biden? I mean, I didn't hear that at all.
Because it didn't happen. And what's also frustrating is that if a Trump supporter does push back, all of a sudden they're called a racist. They're called a white supremacist for defending themselves against these radicals. And what really gets me is that the mainstream media doesn't cover this at all. And there's this saying for the left that silence is violence. The mainstream media silence is violence. They're promoting the violence by not calling it out, not reporting it, and also driving the message that this is unacceptable. By not reporting it, they're saying, actually, we're okay with this kind of violence against Trump supporters.
Yeah.
It only lasts so long before every side starts to fight. And that's, again, really, really bad for America, in my view.
I mean, I think that it's like, when it comes to the corporate media and reporting, I think it's just a message of divisiveness is what it is. Because if you look at, like when they talk about Trump supporters, and even, in my classes, teachers and students will make the synonym between racist and Trump. I mean, like a Trump sign means a racist. And, they really don't report about the diversity that is the Trump party. I mean, Trump has done remarkably well with minorities, more so than any Republican in the past. And it's completely unreported. It's not documented at all. And it's really wrong, and it's really divisive. And there's a reason why they do that.
One quick question on that. So we had this conversation earlier off camera, but talk about your classes, and when they talk about the violence that we've seen over the summer, the looting, the burning, the rioting, do your professors give credit to Antifa and BLM, or do they give credit to someone else for rioting, burning, and looting?
So it's so frustrating because no, I'm serious. I'll come out of class and I'll be just like, they did it again. They like to, I mean, a topic is obviously that's been happening in current events is like, the violence that we saw this summer. And they say that it is Trump supporters and white supremacists, who are synonymous to them, agitating and causing violence against and inciting violence against, these left-wing groups. And that actually it's not BLM or Antifa at all. It's actually white supremacists who are either inciting it and going and like counter protesting them, or they're staging it and trying to pretend like they're Antifa or BLM and then cause violence. I mean,
and these are the people who are probably going to write the history, and they're going to write it that it was conservatives, Trump supporters, that were engaged in violence.